and welcome to this week's IG Live. We are talking today to Tracy Badua. I've got some of her books here. She writes really wonderful middle grade and YA books. We're going to be focusing on her newest one, which is Thea and the Mischief Makers. I've really been enjoying reading it, so if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And just a programming note, next week we will be on Monday. That's the 23rd and an hour earlier. So it's going to be Monday the 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm trying to see if I can angle this to get more of your books in here. There are just so many. I can't get them all in here. Well, I've got a few anyway.
It's a good
and I've
problem
got this
to have.
adult.
I do too.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I know it's a busy time of year, so I appreciate that.
Happy to. Always happy to talk about books.
Oh, wonderful. Well, why don't we go ahead and jump in? And first, I'm not sure if I'm saying your last name right. Is it Badua?
Yeah, you got it. Badua.
All right.
I
Well,
know.
why don't you introduce you? I'm sure a lot of people already know who you are, but go ahead and introduce yourself and then tell us, what was your journey to becoming an author? Is it something you always wanted to do?
Ooh. So, hi everybody. I am Tracy Badua. I write middle grade and young adult, and I think the some of my recent works are already showcased right next to you. But my most recent one was Thea and the Mischief Makers, which is this book. It's a middle grade. It is about Thea. You see her here, who is a star athlete, and she joins this summer camp and realizes she's kind of over her head. And because middle grade authors are terrible people, we make things worse. I added these duendes. If you can see them there, they are these dudes. So that is the most recent one. And my journey to becoming an author, I've always been that person that likes to write. I was like the kid that would take uh, printer paper, like from like my parents' like computer, and like try to just draw some really awfully hand drawn things, and like I would like sell the books to like my grandmother. I was like bizarre thinking about it now. As a little 6-year-old self being like, Grandma, you can have this for 5 cents. With inflation now, I'm sure that's like $5,000. um, the support for reading and writing was something that like I got, throughout my life. And I am a lawyer by day, so that turned into, really honing those writing skills and learning how to write to like a certain method, and that actually lent really well to writing kids fiction, because it has a lot of the similar, like, if for traditional publication you write in not a certain structure, because there's all kinds of stories, but there's like there's beats you have to hit, and there's like different things you need to do, so it kind of weirdly worked well together. So that's a long way.
I'm
long
curious
long way
about
there.
that. I'm so, I know, like you said, you're a lawyer, but then you also write. So when you sit down to write fiction, does it feel like you're really switching gears, or does it seem, like you said, it seems kind of similar? Is it hard to switch mindsets, or it just seems like kind of a continuation of what you've been doing?
So I definitely do have to like physically switch mindsets,
Mm.
because obviously the way that I would write for adults would be different than the way I write for kids, and vice versa. And I realized like some of the tone of my professional emails has gotten like kiddier and kiddier. Like before it would be like very formal, and now it's like, here, I'm just gonna throw in an emoji, and like here's a GIF or GIF or however folks pronounce it. Like, here's one of these, and they're like,
No.
Tracy, this is a professional email. But it's okay, because I'm a KidLit author. They get it. But I do have to kind of split. I have to physically, like, when I write, if I'm going to try to get in an hour or two of like revisions or something after work, I have to actually physically get up and like move around and do something. I can't just be like, all right, let me open this other document and work on that. Like, there has to be a little bit of
You have
separation.
to make like a physical transition in order to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Even if it's like, and some people, some writers are like, I need to have like a candle. I need to have some things, like something to separate. Like,
Mhm.
this is fun writing time where I get to make things up. That is work time where you probably shouldn't be making
Yeah.
things up.
So for you, it's getting up and kind of walking around. Do you do anything to physically change the space where you're working, or
I
it's
mean, I
just so
have,
that you need
like
to move?
physically switch out the laptops.
Mm,
I have learned not to be super specific about how I
mm.
write because if I have two young kiddos, as you can see, their lovely art
Yes, I
is
love.
behind me. But um, like I don't always have the time to like, okay,
Mm,
now I have a long afternoon. I'm going to do the candle. I'm going to do the writing stack. I'm going to do the whatever. And sometimes it's literally like, all right, people are out of the house. I got 20
yes,
minutes. Like, let me see what I can get done in this amount of
right.
time. So, I have gotten less and less picky over the years.
I love that. And well, so it's interesting to me. So you have young kiddos, and yet the group that you write for is older.
Hmm.
I mean, that's so you write middle grade, you write YA. What is it you love about that age? Or I mean, it's kind of a big age range, but what do you love about those groups?
So what and middle grade is obviously what I most recently published. I love the middle grade space because you can be a little bit sillier with
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, and it's also just kind of approaching, I don't know, approaching the issues that younger folks have in kind of a new way with like my many, many years of experience, I guess, to try to like fit it back into like, all right, how can I make this story like fun for younger readers? Like, how can I, and then how can I like make it fun for me and older readers to try to try to fit that into to one space. But I like writing middle grade just because it is such, it's just like it's such a fun age. Kids are so like they're still really excited to do everything. And then on the teen side, they're like a little less excited to do things, but like that's okay. So, and that's like also the fun of and challenge of writing young adult is knowing that like um, you have to shift the mindset from that too. Like people picking up like a YA book might be less excited to read about someone who's like, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and wants like take on the world. By then they're like, oh gosh, like these like I'm not yet at the point where I'm paying taxes, but I also am not going to like read all about unicorns, that kind of thing. So it's always just that every book I try to embark on, it's
Mm-hmm.
always trying to figure out like what's a good age range for this? What's a good kind of mental approach to it? Like what kind of feel do I want to do? Is it going to be bright-eyed bushy tail? Is it going to be a little bit older and like wiser and still trying to figure things out? It's just
So
I just
is that how you figure out so when you have an idea for a story, does the story come to you first and then you think, okay, so is this middle grade? Is this YA? Kind of get a feel for like what the tone of it's going to be?
a little bit of A, a little bit of B. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes something will pop into my head and I'll be like, oh, that definitely is like a middle grade. Cause like, like with Days and summer camp, that to me that screams middle grade. But obviously if we could have made it like a darker book with like kind of more serious Days or something, like that could have been a YA. But with this one I knew to begin with. I think I was like, oh, this one's gonna be a middle grade book. But sometimes I will be like, all right, I have been out of the YA space for a while. Like, what can I write about? What is something that would lend or that like would lend more towards books for teens?
Right.
So it gets kind of a little bit of a. I struggle with coming up with ideas. No one this is a live and like no one tell
Don't
like my
tell
editors
anybody.
I have like no more ideas. So like,
I find that a little hard to believe, but okay. Yeah.
I got nothing. I got nothing. So like,
Well,
it'll
let's dig into this one because this is, like I said, I've been reading it. It is so fun. Being the Mischief Makers, and first, I mean, you kind of gave an introduction to it before, but let's start off talking about how do you say it, duendes or
Duendes. Yep.
duendes? So tell us, what are duendes and why did you decide to write a book about them?
So duendes are these Filipino goblins, and like it is what they are, mischief makers. They're not, the lore is that they're not totally evil, but they'll play pranks on you. They'll steal your shoes, they'll like move your car keys, they'll do things that are just pesky enough. So, um, I I was joking with someone. They're like, "Well, how do you come up with the different character or the different like supernatural aspects of your books?" I think back to all the times that like my grandmothers would like try to scare me off with something like, don't go over there, there's like a monster, or don't do this, there's like a duende, don't do this, there's like a ghost over there. And I was like, let me just work that into a book. So I go back to my trauma with my grandmothers. But I thought they would be a fun, I thought they would be like a fun bit of folklore to explore, especially with, you know, they are Filipino, it is Filipino based folklore, and then you've got this Filipino American kid who's here in the States, so like just kind of the struggle with that and being like, what do you mean, what Duendes, what are you talking about? So that's kind of how those guys met.
Yeah, I thought
In
that
the
was
book.
really fun because I'm sure a lot of kids will relate to hearing these stories, especially from the grandparents. I mean, like, oh, that's just something grandpa says, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're just trying to scare little kids. That's not real, is it? And that's part of what she's going through is first deciding whether she's going to believe in this until she kind of has to.
It is one of those, and I'm sure, like, you know, there is always the how much of this generational like I'm telling me the truth, like, are you, or are you just like messing with me? And in my grandmother's case, it was like a little bit of A and B, of just like they did believe in a lot of the different, you know, bits of folklore, and the different superstitions, so they did believe a lot of that. And then some of it was again legit just to scare me into not
Right, right.
doing annoying things.
But I love how you've done it in kind of, I don't know, I guess you might say like a magical realism kind of way because they have these creatures and yet at the same time she's going through totally normal day that, you know, or normal summer and dealing with summer camp and these social pressures and things like that. And so dealing with some really serious things at the same time with her friends and you know, balancing an old friend who's a little embarrassing and then the
Mm-hmm.
new friend trying to fit in with. So what do you want readers to take away from the book, especially in terms of like facing your fears, dealing with social pressures? What do you hope they take away from it?
Well, so I mean, one of the things that you mentioned, which is obviously her trying to deal with like the new friends and like the kind of awkward friend. And one of the things that Thea struggles with in the book is trying to not be, I guess, like not be the best at everything or not be good at something when she's known for being good at stuff and being popular. So I think one of the things that I would love for young readers to take away from it is like it's okay to not be uh the best at everything. It's okay to be a little bit, you know, unpolished and a little bit more vulnerable. And you know, mild spoiler, but like, you know, throughout the book, she becomes okay with being more genuine, being more authentic to herself, even if it means that this image, this polished image that she puts out is not going to stay forever. So there's that. And then also that you can win lots of people over with food like chicken nuggets. I feel like that's a good message too.
That's a good practical tip. Yeah. I love that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about just in general about access to books.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yours you incorporate like folklore. I'm trying to think off like I know Freddie and the Family Curse, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
you incorporate all of these you know things, and so the importance of diverse books, but also just books in general, kids having access to them. And I know you recently posted on Instagram about how important libraries are. I think you had somebody ask you, a librarian ask you, like, oh, is this do you kind of hate this because we're taking away sales from you? And you were like, no, this is great. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what libraries meant for you as a kid growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. So that actually, so that question came to me at an event that I did at a library where someone was like sometimes we get sometimes we'll have authors who are like, or people who are a little feel weird about oh, my book is out there and like people can get it for free as opposed to going and buying a lot of copies. And it is obviously different for all sorts of writers. But for me personally, I'm like, that's amazing. Like that's so cool that these kids who might not otherwise get a chance to access this story, like they have it on a shelf that they can go pick up at any time. And that's important to me because growing up, we like weren't a book buying family. We were at the library all the time. I feel like if we bought a book, it was like this was a big deal, going to the bookstore, getting something that was like $20. I'm like, oh my gosh, this
A
is amazing. I'll
lot of
cherish
money.
this forever. Right. This is a lot of
Yeah.
money. And so we had to be very, like, you know, very, very selective. It was like your prized treasure, it was yours. But with like, if for things where you just want to like try out some new stories and like just kind of get out there, I was like, the school library and the public library where I grew up were my favorite places. And with our local library from where I grew up, it actually got to the point where we had to start going to a different library because I read all of the picture books that I wanted to read out of that library. And so my parents were like, who does this? Like, I guess you could read them again. I was like, no, I want more. And so we went to one that was like a cross town. So
So
it's
funny.
good. It's good. I was like, of all the things that, of all the problems that like your kid could be causing for you, having to go to the other library is not a terrible one. But
Yeah.
it's why I was like, it is important that, especially when I was younger and I was such a fast reader, I was like, I can't even imagine the financial damage I would have done if my parents had to buy every single one of those books. They'd be like, no.
Right.
To be actually, now that we're talking about this, I wonder if at some point they must have planted it in my head. They're like, oh, you read so many of these, like, we can't drive you today. You should just write one. Like, I wonder if that happened, and it just like, I'm gonna have to talk to them.
Be smart.
I'm gonna be like, did you get sick of driving me and just tell me to write my own? Maybe that's
something to keep you busy in between.
right?
Yeah.
So that they could just like relax after work and not be like, all right, where's your library card?
Good. I'll have to remember that one too. Yeah. Well, so you're talking about going and doing these events. What kind of reaction do you get in general, and also like what? Because I know this one just came out. Was it in October?
Yeah, in
So
October.
what kind of response have you gotten from people when you go and do these events?
Oh my gosh, it's been fantastic because I think for me the process of writing a book is very solitary. Like I said, I just switch out a laptop and then work on that. So there really is it's a lot of also guessing, like, oh man, I hope readers are going to like this. I hope people will actually like it. So it's so different to actually get a chance to talk to readers. And I had a bookstore event a couple of months ago where there was a kid who was very clearly up past his bedtime. I could tell he was like very tired, but he stayed up and he brought his mom so that they could actually they could tell me that they really enjoyed my books and that they wanted to pick up this one. And I was like, oh wow, that kind of stuff is very like warm and fuzzy feeling giving, because it's nice to know that the work that I put into stuff, like some other readers might resonate with it, so they might even just get like 1 or 2 hours of relaxation or relief out of it. It's just nice to see that it's bringing some joy elsewhere.
Right, especially since the writing itself can feel like such a solitary endeavor. It must be nice to connect with people like that.
Yeah, and I enjoy it, and I know it is funny though, because I think there is something about writing that just naturally draws a lot of introverts. So I think it's the balancing of like, I do enjoy the writing part and the solitary and like the having my cup of coffee and just kind of thinking about it. But I also do like to do, like the school visits and like library visits and just talking to readers, because I'm also very, I guess, like very like goal oriented and like praise driven. So whenever a reader is like, I really like this, I'm like, oh, you did?
Yeah. Of course, and getting that feedback, like, must be so nice. Yeah.
Like, I got an A on this one, thank you. Like, nice.
Well, so how long does it take? Let's say, just for example, like Thea and the Mischief Makers, how long does it take to write, and including like doing revisions and all this? Like, how long is that process?
Oh man, so Thea, I think, came together really quickly, and it's a shorter book, so anyone who's looking for short kids books, this one's a good one. But I write fast, mostly because since I do have those younger kiddos, if I don't get an idea out of my head, I might accidentally put it down and not come back to it for like 2 months. So I write really fast. So I will probably get a first draft that's heavily outlined or like all together written. I'll probably get it done in about like a month and some change.
Wow.
But where I like to spend the time is the revisions, because that's where like things are actually coming together. I know what happens in the story, so I can hone things and move things around. So the revisions is what takes me a while. But I think so with Freddie and the Family Curse, for example, I was trying to distill down what the timeline was for that. of like, okay, I wrote it over the course of a couple months, and then I revised it with some critique partners, then revised it myself, then did it again, then got an agent and did all this. And I think when I finally got down to it, I was like, oh, from idea to physically holding the book, it was something like 5.5 years or something like that. And
Uh-huh.
when I did that math like aloud, there were like kids in the audience who were like, what? Like, oh, this is literally half your life. Like I could see
Right.
why that would,
Right.
why that number must shock you. But I was like, okay, like it takes that long sometimes to really feel out an idea. But thankfully, some of the other, once I figured that out, some of the other ideas and the other writing and the other processes kind of came together more quickly.
More, yeah, yeah. So you were saying, so how long for Thea do you think? If the Freddie and the Family Curse was
Right.
5.5,
It was much shorter than the Freddie one. I think this probably took like a month and some change to draft. And then the process of polishing it and sending it out to folks, that was probably another maybe 3 or 4 months. So from kind of like idea to sending it to my editor and being like, is this terrible? Like that would probably be about like at least a 5 or 6 month time frame. And then after that, they come back with like 2 or 3 rounds of like, let's tweak this, let's change this. So it is constant revision, like up until the day that they're like, no more. It's like you're constantly tweaking things.
Is it hard to stop that process? Like, are
It
you always
is.
to go in and change one more thing?
Yes, it is, to the point where I actually have to like tell myself like, okay, no more big changes. You can, if there's like a spelling thing or like a wording thing I want to change, but at some point you just have to let it go and just
That's
like,
hard.
and then like never, I say never read it again. Don't pick it up until it's actually published or like in like a hardcover format where it's like, because if I see something in between then, it will just like destroy me. So it's like I've sent it out and I will not look at it for months.
So then you must already, I assume, be working on other projects. I know you have another one, a follow-up to the Cookie
Yes.
Crumbles that's coming out. Is it next spring?
Yeah. So
Just
we
dessert?
have the Cookie Crumbles is a Great British Bake Off meets Knives Out middle grade mystery
Love it.
that I wrote with Alechia Dow, and it's a ton of fun. And so coming off of that, we have a follow-up to it, They're Just Desserts, which is coming out in May, but it's actually more like a holiday baking championship kind of book, which is perfect because it's like that's exactly all I want to watch this time of year is all holiday related baking all the time. So that's coming out in May, and then I've got a more kind of, it's called Ghoul Summer. It's like a haunted Airbnb kind of thing. That's coming out in September. So it's been busy. It's been busy.
Yeah. And is that all going to be YA or also middle grade?
Also middle grade. So I think like middle, there's just been something about the last year or so where like I kind of need that like fun space where you can be silly and not, take yourself too seriously, but also not write a bajillion words, which is why I can never write like an adult book. So I'll be like, what do you mean, 100,000 words? Like this is like 40 or 50 or something. It's like much shorter. So I am in middle grade now, trying to think of some more YA ideas to kind of float around and try to expand more in that space. But knock on wood.
Ever thought about like picture books, or you?
I feel I would love to do picture books, but I feel like I'm too wordy for them, and I wonder if that's part of the YA / like the like lawyer part of me is I always want to over explain things, and it's like, no, with picture books, like you have to let pictures do the talking, but I'm not an artist like in that kind of traditional drawing way. So we will see. Maybe one day I'll be like succinct enough to do it.
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye out for it. And for I'm so excited for your new books too. Like I said, you write such great books. They've been so fun to read. For anybody who's joining us late, we've been talking about Thea and the Mischief Makers, but of course there are a lot of others that you can check out. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and for anybody who joined us late, this will be up in a few minutes on Instagram, and then of course you can find it on our YouTube channel. And don't forget, next week we are coming on Monday instead of Thursday, so don't miss that. Thank you so much for talking with us, and thanks everybody for joining us. Bye.